Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe, where today we're going to be continuing Stalker Week, taking a look at his signature weapons. Today comes the original melee weapon, forgotten for a long time, given a new lease of life with a buff not too long ago. We are of course taking a look at the Hate. Just like the other Stalker weapons though, it's only obtainable through getting him to actually drop it by defeating him, or by buying the What Stalker bundle from the market for Platinum. But how do the stats actually look when you manage to get it? Well, with a base damage of 70, the majority 49 coming in the form of slash, 10.5 as both impact and puncture, it's definitely not on the low end when it comes to that base damage, but combined with a pretty decent 20% critical chance, and 250% critical damage multiplier, which is a bit above average, a Blood Rush body count combo can really elevate this weapon quite a bit, and with an attack speed of just 0.92, it's going to need that crit combined with Berserker to really make it feel like you aren't playing in slow motion. In addition to that, a 15% status chance is enough to stick a couple of dual stats on there if you want to go for that style of build, especially when Berserker's fully spooled up. You actually have a pretty decent chance of proccing fairly regularly, especially those slash procs which can really boost damage. But one thing that the Hate has that isn't shown in the stats is that the weapon has momentum. Now this isn't something that I've really mentioned with melee before, because it's simply that the attacks while in motion will cause the frame to ignore staggers and knockdowns from enemy units, meaning that melee against things like bombards or heavy gunners can be a lot more fun since you aren't on the ground every 5 seconds. Now that said, the weapon does of course have some downsides. Firstly is that without Berserker, it feels like you're playing encased in syrup. It's that slow, and when combining that with a much shorter range than it looks like it should have, landing those initial hits can be a bit weird, as well as the landing aerial shots on things like Shield Ospreys or the Void Shield drones. But they are both naturally able to be modded around with the use of, as I said, Berserker or Fury, Prime Fury when that comes out, and Prime Reach as well for the range if you feel that it gives you enough of a boost to actually need it on there. Now in terms of stances for the weapon, you have a choice of 2, Stalking Fan and Reaping Spiral. In honestly, much like a lot of stances, there isn't much to choose between the two. Now, to be honest, I'm actually not really a fan of either of them. They feel a bit weird, they feel a bit clunky to be honest. However, I went with Reaping Spiral after quite a bit of testing. It felt like it was a bit faster and it had a little bit of forward momentum to it. It just felt way better to me. However, much like all my builds, grab both of those stances, try them both out, see which one you prefer. Performance wise there isn't a huge difference between the two, so it is all down to that personal preference. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod the Hate. Now it doesn't come with any polarities as standard. I've added 4 former, you don't really need to add this much, but this is because I've been experimenting with builds for years with this thing. I think two pretty much will do it. I've got 2 Vs and 2 dashes on here. You probably just need a V and a dash in all honesty. Now this build here, this is the build that I would use for pretty much every situation. So we've got Reaping Spiral as the stance. Naturally, crit weapon, Blood Rush, body count, Berserker. We've got Organ Shatter on here for critical damage. Life Strike on here, which is going to give us health back every time we crit. Pressure Point for raw damage. Then we've got our elemental mods. At the moment I've got Corrosive on here, so Fever Strike and Shocking Touch, which will be good for non-corrosive projection Void, non-corrosive projection Grineer. If you're going to go against corrosive projection in the Void and against the Grineer, switch out Fever Strike for Molten Impact and you've got the radiation damage, or you can switch out even further and then you've got viral damage. And if you want to go against the infested, the corrosive damage that we had on originally is probably what you would do there. And if you want to go against Corpus, what I do fairly regularly is I go pure poison. So we'll put on the Virulent Scourge on as well. We get a little bit extra status, and then we got pure poison to really deal with cutting through those shields and taking out those slightly squishier Corpus units. Now, if you really wanted to, there is a couple of things you could do with this. Personally, I wouldn't recommend putting Buzzkill on here, just because there honestly really isn't room. And that is kind of the problem that we have at the moment in terms of melee weapons, is there really isn't enough room for much else. For example, one thing that is actually fairly regularly put on is something like Prime Reach. Does make hitting aerial targets a bit easier. It also makes, sweeping attacks that bit more effective. But finding room for it on a build such as this one on the Hate. Now, one thing I have seen people do is replace Organ Shatter. Personally, I wouldn't, because that bonus is too good, I think, to lose. And I have seen also people replace Life Strike, which is, once again, something I personally wouldn't do. But replacing Life Strike is not too bad, because then you've got your constant channeling in here. It reduces it back down to 5 energy every time you channel. So it is something to really think about. It's going to very much depend on your own playstyle, the modding of your frame, and also if you're going to be using other things to regain health. Like if you don't want to use the Hate for in its stance mode, if you really dislike all the stances and don't want to use it in the stance mode, then having Life Strike on here is completely pointless. So I would remove that, and Prime Reach is actually a pretty good substitute for that. Or if you wanted to, and you're not going to use it in the in that channeling, not the channeling mode, the stance mode, you could also switch Prime Reach out here. You could put Tree Steal in here. A little bit extra crit chance means it's going to proc that Berserker that little bit quicker. So it's definitely going to be completely up to you. There is a lot of things you can do to really suit your playstyle here. So just have a mess around with it and see how you feel. So do I recommend maxing this out if you manage to get your hands on it? And yeah, I do think it's worth it, even though that is kind of easier said than done sometimes. The base damage is actually pretty decent, and when combined with the simply ridiculous Blood Rush body count combo, with crit damage on top of that 250% damage multiplier, this thing actually hits deceptively hard. You can see me in the footage with the weapon. It was performing just fine in a random sortie. Admittedly, that was against Corpus, who aren't exactly the hardest things to kill in the world, but this thing performs even pretty damn well in Grineer sorties, the heavily armoured ones. As you can see in the background now, I went into the Simulacrum and did a bit of testing, and it doesn't take that long to dispatch the 15 level 90 heavy gunners, which is more often than not the enemy level you're going to have at the top end of the sorties, and that's a pretty unrealistic scenario. You are never going to run into that many heavy gunners at once. You will have a lot of the easier killed units to kill at the same time. But you know what? While like most melee weapons, the Hate might not play or feel that unique compared to other heavy melee weapons. It has something that does still make it special, and which is why I've been using it a little bit more lately, and that it is chronically underused. Nobody uses this thing, and it is amazing to bring it out of the box and just blast around with it for a bit. And it looks awesome as well, which is another plus for it. The buff to the Hate really brought it up to par with some of the stronger weapons, and while it's still definitely not top tier, it is easily more than good enough to deal with the content we have available right now. I would say it's worth putting the former on because it's a weapon that, no, it's not the best out there, but it is something more. It's hard to obtain since the drop rates are actually insanely low, and that makes it a bit more special. I hope you guys enjoyed my look at the Hate. As always, I love reading your feedback on both the weapons and the videos themselves. Nobody is perfect, and I am always looking at ways to improve. I always read all the comments, even if I can't physically respond to them all. But as always guys, many thanks for watching, and I shall see you in the next video.